The internet says Will Byers shocked fans with a boyfriend reveal, but that's not what actually shook people. The real bombshell wasn't who Will might love. It was what that moment exposed about how deeply fans had emotionally attached themselves to him. A quiet character suddenly became a mirror, and when people see themselves reflected in a story, every tiny change starts to feel personal. That's why this wasn't just another plot development. It became a cultural moment, a moment where nostalgia collided with growth, comfort collided with change, and a fictional kid suddenly carried real emotional weight for millions of people watching. And before we get into it, quick reminder, if you enjoy breakdowns like this and want more deep dives into the stories behind the stories, hit subscribe and help me reach 1,000 subscribers. It genuinely helps the channel grow and lets me keep making these. Because once you understand why this reaction exploded, you'll never look at Will the same way again.
Will was never framed like the rest of the group. While everyone else moved forward into crushes, confidence, and independence, Will stayed emotionally still. He wasn't chasing what was next. He was holding on to what used to be. That made him feel softer, quieter, more fragile, not in a weak way, but in a way that made people want to protect him. From the beginning, Will was written as the kid who had already been through too much. He was the one the world wasn't supposed to hurt again. That framing slowly turned him into something different from the others. Not just a character, but a kind of emotional safe place inside a show that kept getting darker and heavier. And once something becomes emotionally safe, people stop wanting it to change at all. That's where the tension started. Because when a character is built around comfort and familiarity, growth doesn't feel like growth anymore. It feels like intrusion. It feels like something is being taken away. And that quiet, emotional framing set everything else in motion. But that emotional protection didn't stay passive for long.
Something shifted when fans stopped seeing Will as a character and started seeing him as something they emotionally owned. Not legally, not logically, but internally. Over time, people built their own version of Will in their heads. A version that felt safe, familiar, and comforting. A version that didn't challenge them or force them to confront change. That internal version slowly became more powerful than anything the show itself could write. So when new layers started appearing, longer looks, heavier pauses, emotionally loaded moments, it didn't feel like storytelling anymore. It felt personal, like someone was touching something that already belonged to them. That's why the online discussion didn't stay curious or calm. It escalated fast. Because people weren't debating what Will was, they were defending what Will meant to them. And when meaning feels threatened, logic disappears. Interpretation turns emotional, speculation turns protective, and conversation quietly becomes conflict. And that's when tiny moments started feeling much bigger than they should have. There was no official moment, no scene where Will turned to the camera and labeled his feelings, no dramatic confession, no clear turning point written into the script. On paper, nothing had changed. What changed was how people watched. A look lasted half a second longer than expected. A pause felt heavier. A line suddenly sounded loaded. Moments that would have passed quietly in earlier seasons started feeling intentional, not because the writing shifted, but because the audience's attention did. Once people start searching for meaning, they always find something. Online, that curiosity didn't stay as maybe. It turned into this means. It turned into certainty. Fans didn't just share interpretations, they repeated them, amplified them, and emotionally invested in them until the interpretation itself started to feel real. That's how fandom reality forms, not through official statements, but through emotional consensus. And once that consensus exists, questioning it doesn't feel like disagreement anymore. It feels like betrayal. And that's when the fandom quietly split in two. This is where one story became two completely different emotional experiences. For one side, this moment felt like recognition. It wasn't just about Will, it was about finally seeing a quiet, unspoken part of themselves reflected on screen. That kind of recognition doesn't feel casual, it feels personal, so people became protective of it. For the other side, it didn't feel like anger, it felt like loss. Will had always existed in a kind of emotional childhood. Soft, suspended, safe. The kid who didn't grow up as fast as the others. The one who wanted everything to stay the same. So when he started being read as romantic, more mature, emotionally moving forward, it didn't feel like development. It felt like something familiar was disappearing. And people don't react calmly to emotional loss. So that discomfort got redirected into debates about writing, pacing, and whether the story felt earned or forced. But underneath all of it was the same quiet conflict: recognition versus preservation. Both sides felt justified. Both sides felt emotional. Both sides felt like they were protecting something important. But eventually, that pressure had to land somewhere. From the outside, it looked simple. An actor films a scene, the scene airs, people react. End of story. But inside, it's anything but simple. Emotional scenes take hours to shoot, long days of repeating the same vulnerable moment again and again. You have to keep the feeling alive without letting it go numb. You have to stay open while dozens of people watch you try to be honest on command. That kind of emotional labor doesn't show up on screen. It drains you quietly. Then the scene finally airs, and there is no quiet afterward. Reaction videos, edits, comment sections, praise and criticism arriving at the same time. Both loud, both heavy. For a young actor, that doesn't feel abstract. It feels invasive. And then something happened that changed how people watched everything. Noah Schnapp came out publicly. Overnight, the meaning of Will's story shifted. Even though nothing in the show itself had changed, suddenly people weren't just watching a character, they were watching a character through the lens of the actor's real identity. That blurred a boundary most audiences rely on, the emotional distance between fiction and real life. And that changed the weight of every single moment on screen. The real shock wasn't the boyfriend, it was what it revealed about us. This moment wasn't just about a romantic reveal. It wasn't even about a breakdown. It was about growth, identity, and letting a character evolve while part of the audience clung to the version they had loved for years. Even gentle, honest change can feel seismic when people are deeply invested. Fans weren't arguing about writing, they were arguing about what Will meant to them. Some wanted recognition, others wanted preservation. Both sides felt justified. Both sides felt emotional. Both sides were protecting something bigger than any plotline. Every look, every pause, every subtle gesture became amplified because the audience had already invested so much of themselves in him. What used to feel like simple storytelling now carried layers of meaning. Suddenly, Will wasn't just a character on a screen. He was a reflection of nostalgia, emotional comfort, and personal identity all rolled into one. And the impact of that shift didn't end when the episode did. Even years later, the smallest moment with Will can spark conversation, speculation, and strong emotion. Awareness changed the way people watched. Projection transformed interpretation. And a character who once existed safely on screen now exists fully in the hearts, minds, and emotions of the audience. Every subtle glance, every pause, every quiet line carries weight. What used to feel like minor storytelling now feels layered, meaningful, and even personal. For some, every moment becomes a mirror reflecting their own identity and experiences. For others, every shift feels like loss, like something comforting has slipped away without permission. That tension doesn't disappear. Once emotional investment reaches this level, it lingers. It shapes discussions, reactions, and expectations. It transforms calm observation into passionate debate. And that's why the Will Byers moments continue to resonate long after the episodes air. Which brings us to the uncomfortable truth behind the fandom reaction. The bombshell wasn't the boyfriend, it was in ourselves. This moment revealed more about the audience than the show. Fans weren't just reacting to a storyline, they were reacting to their own emotional investments, their nostalgia, and the comfort they had attached to the familiar version of Will. Recognition versus preservation. Emotional attachment versus the inevitability of growth. Every look, every pause, every subtle gesture became heavier because people had already put so much of themselves into him. Will didn't just grow up, he reflected us. He held up a mirror to our own expectations, projections, and readiness to accept change. That's why this moment resonated far beyond the screen. It wasn't just a reveal, it was a cultural mirror, showing exactly how deeply fiction can touch reality. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep dives into the stories behind the stories, hit subscribe and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support keeps these videos coming, and it helps us explore every angle of the stories you love. Because once you see it, you'll never watch Will the same way again.